Okay, so good morning. Today's daf is Nun Vav in Masechet Sanhedrin. Let me share my screen and we'll get started. Um, we are continuing our travels through Sanhedrin and particularly the seventh chapter. And we're continuing to detail the prohibitions for which one receives stoning. In this chapter, first we began, of course, last chapter we had the details of how one performs the procedures of stoning. But in this chapter, we had the procedures for the other three forms of capital punishment: burning, beheading, and strangulation. And now, as we're going through, having gone through those procedures, we now go through lists and detail what violations of the Torah trigger which of the uh, uh, death penalties. And so we are going through the prohibitions that receive stoning, and we're going to pick up with the Mishnah at the bottom of Nun Hayam Bet to detail the laws of blasphemy. So let's continue. So Hamagadev Enochayev Ad Yifarish Es Hashem, that in order to be liable for blasphemy, you need to use God's name. Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha. Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha continues and says that now we turn to Daf Nun Vav Amud Aleph. B'chol Yom Danin Es Ha'edim Bekinoi, that during the entire time that they are evaluating the case, they have the witnesses, and the judges and the witnesses use a kinoi, use a nickname, a pseudonym for Hashem. And what is that pseudonym? Yakeh Yossi es Yossi. It's the fact that Yossi, which is going to represent Hashem's name, is hitting Yossi, meaning that on some level, and we'll see shortly, that we need to have a cursing that uses God's name and curses God. So there's a double role for God's name in the curse. First, God needs to be the subject who's doing the cursing, and God needs to be the object of the curse. And only then will we see that there'll be liability. Okay, and let's take a look at Rashi, the first Rashi on Nun Vav Amud Aleph. B'chol Yom, Kolzman Shahayu Nosim v'Nosim b'Bdikas Edim. During the entire time that they are evaluating the witnesses, Hayudanin Osan Bekinoi, they would use a nickname. Kilomer Hayudanin Imahem Ubodginotam, meaning that they would discuss the case and they would evaluate the witnesses. Bekinoi, with the nickname. Heich Amar Kach. Amar, what did he say? Meaning, what did the blasphemer say? They would ask the witnesses. Kach Amar, and they would say, this is what he said. Yakeh Yossi es Yossi. They would use the term Yossi as a representative of Hashem's name. And Hai Kinoi Lav Kinoi Hashem. This is obviously not a true Kamar. This is not a true nickname of God. It's not really a name of God. Ella based in Machnin b'divreihem, but rather the based in would sort of hide their words b'divreihem haklala kape acherim and associate the curse with others. Kol shem mahapech dvarav umedaber ka'adam zeh shemedaber umekalel the tola ba'acher, karile kinoi. And anytime you sort of are not clear in your speaking, and you use nouns that can be or pronouns especially that have a difficult antecedent, so that you're unclear as to whom you're referring to, that can be called being kinoi in your language. Bilashon Chachamim. That's the way the Chacham referred to kinoi. V'yesh lo chaver b'shvuos, and there's an example of that in Masechah Shvuos. V'gam b'lashon hamikra, and similarly in the Torah, in Tanakh itself. Ve'el adam lo akaneh ki lo yadati akaneh. This is in Iyov. Perek Lamed Bet Psukim, the end of Pasuk Kaf Aleph, the beginning of Pasuk Kaf Bet, where it says that I am not able to dissemble. I'm not able to speak in an unclear fashion. I need to speak clearly, is what it's saying in Iyuv. Ulahachi nakat Yosef as Yossi, and that's why we use the language of Yossi as Yossi. The Arba Otiot, because there are four letters in it, Ika, Kashem ben Arba Otio, just like the Yud and the K and the Vav and the K, that De'enu Chayev Ella al Shem Hamiyucha, because that's the name that one needs to use if one's Jewish. We'll see later today. Dahainu Shem ben Arba Odio. You need to use the name that has four letters in it. Umishum de Chashbono Shel Yossi, and moreover, it's nice that we're using this term Yossi because if you calculate its gematria, Cheshbono Shel Elokim, it comes out to the same calculation as Elokim. Yud is 10, Vav is 6, Samech is 60, that's 76, and Yud is 10, that's 86. And if we take a look at Elokim, Elokim Aleph is 1, Lamed is 30, Hey is 5, so that's 36. Then Yud is 10, so that's 46, and Mem is 40, that's 86. 86 equals 86. Ulahachi nakat yaka zeh et zeh. And with respect to the fact that we referred to this one hitting that one, del yalfina lekamen, we're going to see coming up, de'enu chayev ad sheyivarach as shem b'shem. You need to use God's name in order to curse God's name, in order to be able to engage in a blasphemy that is deserving of stoning. So that is Rashi's explanation. Really helps us understand what's going on. So now
Why
back
not
into
use the? I think we have an example, and I didn't quite understand the example in Eo, but in Chumash itself, we actually read this a week or two ago. Eya asher eya, isn't that four letters? And it's also a reference to God. It's a kinui, right?
well, one is that is a more we're clearly trying not to use any actual name of God, and that what you said is actually being used as a reference to God. So here we're specifically trying not to use something that is ever used for God, because that also raises problems. We want to make sure that what we say is actually not in any way, even if we don't say it with an intention of being a curse of Hashem, can be understood to be a curse of Hashem. And so as a result, that's why Yossi is used over Ehyeh. Ehyeh, which means I will be, is in fact an aspect, it's a characteristic of God, right? If God is infinite, if you think about the way I always think about this, especially as a numbers person, as a math person, is that infinity, it doesn't make a difference where you start your infinity. It will always go on forever. And so as a result, God's future, the I will be, is always asher is always the same length as God's as God, whatever God's future is. So at all points in time, God is always forever. So that's the way I understand that. And that actually is a reference to an aspect of God. And so we're specifically not trying to use any kind of nickname for God that actually references God. So that, but you make an important point that in that you're highlighting that we do have a number of different names of God, and that is going to be relevant to our discussion, because if you don't use, especially if a Jew doesn't use the shame of Yud K and then Vav K in the terms of the name, then that's not going to constitute a problem. That's not going to constitute the prohibition that results in stoning, at least I should say. So Nigmar Hadin. So back into the Gemara, second line, third word on the line. So now but they can't when the case is done and they've reached a conclusion, as Rashi says, next Rashi, we're now 3, 6, 9, 12 lines down, and maybe 13 lines down in the Rashi, in the narrow lines. Nigmar Hadin, Ubo Lomar chayav, and they're ready to say that this guy is liable, that he should be convicted. Chayav who? That lo hayu yecholin lahargo. They can't yet kill him. Al pi edus shishamo. They can't yet kill him based on the testimony that they heard, because shaharei lo shamu mipiem ella klalas kinoi. They only heard it using the term Yossi and not using the actual name that they used, that the blasphemer used. And so we actually have to have a moment of essentially in court blasphemy in order to know exactly what they're going to convict the person of. So what happens? So lo hargin bechinoi. We're not allowed to kill the person using that nickname. Ella motzian kol ha'adam lachutz. Rather, everybody who's not necessary for the decision, meaning all people who are not judges and the witnesses themselves, all get sent out of the courtroom. Shoalin es hagadol shebeinehen va'omer lo. They ask the eldest of the and most important of the witnesses, and they say to him, "Emor masha shamata beferish." You have to tell us exactly what you heard. V'hu omer, and then he says it. V'hadayanin omdin al raglayim, and the judges will get up onto their feet, v'korin v'lo ma'achid, and they have to tear their clothing, because that's how bad it is to hear somebody curse God's name, and they are not allowed to fix that clothing. V'hasheni omer, and then a second witness will say, af ani kamahu, I also heard like him, and if there's a third witness, v'hashlishi omer af ani kamahu, I also heard like him. So that is our Mishnah. That's the details of the procedures. And I'll just note, let's go back into Rashi. Why do we take everybody out of the courtroom? Elamotzian as kol adam lachutz deganaihu, because an embarrassment. It's a mistreatment. Lahashmiya berchas Hashem larabim, to have the quote unquote blessing of God in public. Now again, just to be clear, we're going to regularly use the term bless in quotes because we don't like to say the cursing. And so as a result, just be aware that when we say blessing in this context of this Gemara, we generally mean curses. So let's take a look at the Gemara. The Gemara details additional rules regarding blasphemy, quoting a brisa, and then discussing, it should be an end there, then discussing the source of the teaching. So, Tana, ad shiavarach shem b'shem. You need to use God's name to curse God's name. That is the only way that you will that they will be subject to the death penalty. Again, using the phraseology shiavarach, that it means bless, again as a lashon ma'alia. Minahani mili. How do I know that this is in fact the case, that you need to use God's name in order to bless God's name? Amar Shmuel da Amar Kra v'nokev shame binak v'chulo binak vo shame yumat. That it has a double language of no cave shame, and so as a result, it's as if one name of God is cursing God's name itself. So that is what how Shmuel learns this concept. So now the problem is how do I know that no cave means curse? So mimai dahai no cave lishna devaruchehu. How do I know that no cave means some kind of quote unquote blessing? Diksiv ma'akov lo kabo kel. That when Bilam talks about trying to curse curse the Jews, he says, "How can I curse that which God does not want cursed?" And so clearly, kabo in that context is referring to cursing. Vazharte mehacha, and the warning that we have that we're not allowed to engage in such cursing is Elokim lo tikalel. You're not allowed to curse God. So as a result, and that's actually in next week's parsha. We're getting close. We'll have a bunch of Daf Yomi coincidences. Of course, given that this week's parsha is Parshas Yisro, it's not so surprising. But so that is the answer as to why we say that it means curse. Now, but maybe the Ema Mivras, maybe it means some sort of stabbing or piercing. Dixi vaikov chor bidalto, that they pierced a hole in its lid to indicate that it, again, that shows, making a hole, a nekev is a hole, so maybe a hole is what it's referring to. And we could say that the warning against making a hole essentially in God's name is the following. We have, this is in Dvarim Perik Yud Bet. V'ibadtem es shmam lo sasun kein la Hashem Elokeichem. Right, you need to destroy all of the names of the idols, but you're not allowed to do that when it comes to God. So as a result, that distinction is telling us that we can't erase God's name. This is in fact how we know that we're not allowed to erase God's name. So be'ina shem b'shem, Vileka, well, it can't be referring to piercing something, because how in the world would you pierce God's name with God's name? That's just not possible. So now we're going to try two different efforts at showing that maybe it is possible. So one effort.
One question: could we, in the pasuk above, could we interpret? And I'm wondering if why they may not, or maybe they do raise this in the Gemara. Elohim lo tikaleo, meaning judges, because we're talking about Sanhedrin, and we maybe shouldn't curse the judges as well.
First of all, you're absolutely right. I believe that actually in the context, it really does refer to judges. And in fact, we also learn judges from that pasuk, but we definitely view this as the warning about cursing God as well. So you're right that in fact it has a double meaning in that pasuk. I'm not sure. I haven't looked up sort of the whether when you write this name of Elohim, whether it actually is considered a non holy version, or it's considered a holy version. But you're absolutely right that in that context, it does in fact refer to judges as well. But the point is that we are definitely understanding it as effectively being a prohibition against both cursing judges and cursing God. But we're going to now try, maybe it does mean piercing, instead, ekov means piercing as opposed to cursing. And so as a result, how do we fulfill using God's name to pierce God's name? Maybe what you could say is that you have two God's names, one on parchment one on parchment two, and you stab into both of them. And so when you stab into the top one is pushing into the bottom one and causing the bottom one to tear. And so as a result, that could be the concept of God's name piercing God's name. No, hahu nokev v'chozer v'nokev. That's not really God's name doing the piercing. It's the knife, is whatever you're using to pierce is piercing the first piece of paper, and then it's piercing another piece of paper. The name's not doing any piercing. Maybe you put it on the edge of the knife, and you write God's name on the edge of the knife, uvazaba, and then you cut with it, and then you pierce with it. No, it's not God's name that's doing the tearing, it's the sharpness of the knife. Meaning, if you don't have a sharp knife and you did that, it wouldn't necessarily do anything. So the bottom line is that it can't possibly mean to pierce, because it just wouldn't be possible to use God's name to pierce God's name. So now we go, Ema Parushe Shmehu. Maybe it's some sort of explanation of God's name, or specifying of God's name, because we have in the beginning of Sefer Bamidbar, Diksiv Vayikach Moshe va'Aaron es ha'anashim ha'ela asher nikvu b'shemos, that Moshe and Aaron took these people who were specified by their name. And so as a result, v'azhar mahacha, and we could say that the warning about not doing this, about not specifying God's name, is as Hashem Elochecha tira. You need to fear God. So two problems with that. Actually, there'll be three problems with that. Chada No, two problems with it. Chada de be'ina b'shem b'shem. No, one, of course, just as we saw earlier, you need to use God's name in order to engage in this violation, Valeka. You're not actually using God's name to specify God's name, and so as a result, there's no reflexive aspect to it. V'od havaya le azhara aseh. That warning that you're saying, because again, we always need to have a warning for every violation for which there is a penalty. So you can't just have a prohibition written once; it needs to be written twice in order for there to be an enforceable penalty. And so as a result, the azhara that you're offering, that's not a great azhara. It's not a great warning because of azharas asay lo shma azhara. We don't consider a positive commandment, and this is a positive commandment that says you shall fear God. That's not considered a warning. So as a result, we would not have a warning for the usage of no cave in the terms of saying that no cave means explanation of or specification. So now we've answered, we've responded, and we've defended Shmuel's response as to how we can say that it's referring to blasphemy. Now, the Ibayasema, we can also say that the following story that we have in Parshas Emor in Sefer Vayikra actually teaches us that Vayikov means to curse, because Amar Kra Vayikov Vayikalel. So this is in Vayikra Parakaf Dalid Pasuk Yud Aleph, and it says that first it notes to him that it says that he Vayikov, and then it says Vayikalel, and he cursed. So as a result, this shows Lamemra de Nokev Klalahu, that when you say no cave, it means a curse. Vidilma ad avad tarvaihu, and by the way, that is a story about a person cursing God's name, and we end up killing the person with skila. So that seems to be a great example that shows that no cave means curse. But maybe Vidilma ad avad tarvayu, maybe Vayikov means something else, and he did both things. He did Vayikov and he did Vayikalel. No, lo salkadaidik. That can't be. Diksiv hotzei as hamikalel, because when they punish the person, God tells them to take out the person who did the cursing. The loksiv hosi etz hanokev v'hamikalel. It doesn't tell us to take out the person who did the no cave and the cursing. So shmami nachadahi. So that shows that it's just one thing. So that is how two explanations of how we know that it's got to be that you are talking about cursing and not something else. Okay, so Tanarabanan, ish matam lomar ish. So when we have this prohibition, the prohibition says the following. It says, where we find it, this is a pasuk.
Well, I'm sorry, what was the Hava mean here regarding no cave? No cave would mean what if it doesn't mean to curse?
Well, we looked at two other possibilities. It could mean to make a hole.
No. In this set, what Ibas Emav, Amakra, Vayikov, that's from Parshat Emor.
Right. Well, there was any of the possibilities that we could have had before. Maybe it means something else. It does. We don't need to specify the definition. The question is whether or not it can mean something else, and the conclusion is it can't mean something else. So
Oh,
that's the way that to understand it. So it can't mean something else because it's clear that the person only did one thing wrong. So again, this is pasuk Parak Dalad pasuk Tet Vav in Sefer Vayikra in Parshas Emor, and it says, let me see if they have the full quote of the pasuk on the side here. It says, "Ve'el b'nei Yisrael to daber lemor, to the Jewish people you should say, ish ki yikalel elokav v'nasa avon that no v'nasa chata'o, excuse me, that to the Jewish people you should say, anyone who curses his God will bear his sin." And so that is so. The question is why reference ish ish? So the this brisa suggests larabos es ha'ovdei kochavim. It comes to include non-Jews, shemus harin al berkas Hashem ki Yisrael, that they have the same prohibition against blessing God as Jews. However, when it comes to their execution, they're not executed through stoning, they're executed by the sword. And indeed, that's the only form of execution for non-Jews. Because any execution for a non-Jew is only with a sword, meaning beheading. One second, you're telling me that we learn that the non-Jews are covered by the prohibition of cursing God from the usage of ish ish in Parak Daled Pasuk Tes Vav of Vayikra, but mehasam nafka Hashem zu birkas Hashem. But we know that in fact that the non-Jews are covered by the prohibition of cursing God based on the fact a pasuk in Sefer Bereshis where it says Vayitzav Hashem Elokim al ha'adam lemor mikol eitz hagan achol tochel, yeah, achol tochel. So the we are going to learn a brisa. This is the brisa that teaches us all of the Sheva mitzvahs b'nei Noach, and we're going to see that indeed today's daf is one of the core dapim and continues on to tomorrow, core sources regarding the hilchos of the laws of the Noah, 7 Noahide laws. And so it's from the usage of the word Hashem there that we're about to see that people derive that non-Jews are subject to the prohibition of blessing God. So now we have two different sources, ish ish, and the in Perek Kav Daled Pasuk Tes Vav of Vayikra, and Hashem in Perek Bet Pasuk Tes Zayin of Bereshis. So Rabbi Yitzchak Nafka offers the following explanation for why we have both of these prohibitions. So lo nitzrucha el rabas es hakinuyin. No, the point is that we need both because not only are non-Jews subject to of the prohibition of cursing God using God's key name of the Yud and the Hey and then the Vav and the Hey, but rather it's also to include any other names of God. Valiba de Rabbi Meir, and this is consistent with Rabbi Meir. The Tanya, because Rabbi Meir says, Ish ish ki kalel elokav v'nasachet o, and any man who curses his God shall bear his sin. Ma Talmud Lomer. What is this teaching us? Velo kvar nemar v'nokev shem Hashem mos yumas. We already know that somebody who curses God is certainly going to die. Lefisha nemar v'nokev shem mos yumas. Right, since it says that one who blasphemes God is going to be put to death. So Yachol lo yehechayev ela al shem hamiyucha bilvad. I might have thought that the only time you're liable is if you use the specific name of God. Minayan l'rabbos kol kinuyin. How do I know that every name of God is also subject to the penalty? Talmud Lomar ish ki kalel elokav. So as a result, the repetition in that pasuk is teaching us the ish ish ki kalel elokav is telling us mikol makom, doesn't make a difference which way, which God name of God you use. Divrei Rebbe Meir, and Rebbe Meir would seem to be saying whether it's a Jew or a non-Jew, you're going to be punished even for other names. The Chachamim disagree. Al shem hamiyuchad b'misa b'al kinuyim ba'azhara. No, when it comes to the single name of God, so then that's when you would get the death penalty. For the other names, you violated a warning, but you're not subject to the death penalty. So you would get potentially lashes, but that would be it. Ufliga de Rabbi Miasha, and this argues on Rabbi Miasha. So again, we now understand why Rabbi Meir needs both psukim, because he needs both psukim, because one pasuk tells us about the name of God, the main name of God, and the other pasuk tells us about other names of God. And this all argues on Rabbi Miasha. The Amar Rabbi Miasha ben Noach shebeirach es Hashem bekinuyim, that when it comes to somebody who's not Jewish who blesses God's name using other names, l'Rabbanan chayiv, uh, um, then he's liable according to the rabbis. My taima damar kra kager keezrach, that when it comes to the pasuk, this is again in Sefer Vayikra Parakuf Dalid. Now this is pasuk Tet Zayin. It says that you imply the law to a convert and to a native alike. Ger ve'ezrachu debeina benakvo shame. It's only a convert and a native Jew, meaning it's only somebody who's fully Jewish that we say that they require the name, that the blessing of the name to be the name, the main name of God. But for anybody else, for a non-Jew, you would not need it. Aval ovid kochavim afilu bekinoi. Even for a non-Jew, even another name would be sufficient. So again, so here we have according again, while Rabbi Yitzchak Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha says that that according to Rabbi Meir, everybody, whether you're Jew or non-Jew, any name you use is going to be problematic. According to Rabbi Miasha, no, only for non-Jews is using another name problematic. For Jews, the only penalty is for using the main name of God. And for the Chachamim, again, they say that only the main name of God is going to result in the death penalty, whether you're Jewish or not Jewish. If you use a different name, you're not going to be subject to the death penalty. So we now have three different viewpoints: Rabbi Meir, which would be according to everybody; the Chachamim according to Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha; and the Chachamim according to Rabbi Miasha. So now we're going to try to understand the Rebbe Meir. Hi keger keezrach my avidle. What does Rebbe Meir do with the term a convert and native alike? Remember, he's the one who says that it doesn't make a difference whether you're Jewish or not Jewish. If you use a nickname, you're going to be still subject to the death penalty. You don't have to use the main name of God. So ger be'ezrach beskila. So it tells us that no, what is the law that applies to the convert and to the full Jew, meaning to both somebody who's born Jewish and somebody who's converted to Judaism, it is that they are both killed with stoning. Aval ovid kochavim b'sayif, but a non-Jew is killed with the sword. Salkatai kamina hoel itrabu. I might have said, since non-Jews are included together in this verse with the prohibition of blessing God, so we're also going to include them with the other aspects of the law. So and so that they maybe would get the same penalty. So Kamash Malan, by telling us that Ker Ezrach Kager Ezrach, that the same law applies to the convert, that one law applies to the convert and to the native, it's teaching us that only those two will get skila, but the non-Jew will get sayif, will get beheading. Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha, Aliba de Rabbanan. Now, according to the rabbis, according to Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha, who say that that you can only get the death penalty whether you're Jewish or not Jewish for using the main name of God. So again, what do they do? Hi kedger kezrach my avidle. What do they do with the phrase the convert is like a native, meaning that they treat them the same? Because where do we differentiate between our treatment of the convert and native born Jew from a non-Jew? No, when it comes to a Jew or a convert, that is where we require that you use one name to curse God's name. But when it comes to a non-Jew, then as long as they curse God's name, it doesn't really matter how they do it. They don't need to use God's name in order to curse God's name. Again, that is why we said in our Mishnah, right, Yake Yose, es Yosi, because we generally we're talking about a Jew who's in the court, and we need to use that language of one God's name is effectively hitting another God's name. So that is the explanation according to the rabbi. So ish lamali. So why do we repeat ish lamali? So now again, Rashi tells us, Bein l'Rebbe Miasha, Bein l'Rebbe Yitzchak Nafka, Aliba de Rabbanan, Birkas Hashem, Miviyatsu Hashem Elokim, Nafka. We already learned um, uh, um, from V'yitzav Hashem Elokim Nafka, right? We learn the prohibition of cursing God from the Tzav Hashem Elokim. So Kinuya Miger ve'Ezrach Nafki Rabbi Yasha the Rabbi Yitzchak Nafka Ha Amar Rabbanan Peturin. So the point is that what do we do with this ish phraseology that we have according to the rabbis, because they don't need the ish lesson, because they have limited their situation to just cursing God's name, and so as a result we have an extra pasuk. So Dibra Torah Kol Shom B'nei Adam. That double language is just the Torah speaking in the language of people. When we say ish, it means anyone, and that repetition doesn't necessarily teach us something. Okay.
Did we explain Rabbi Menashe? We explained Rabbi Yitzchak. We explained Rabbi Meir in their discussion, Ke'er Ge'ezrach. But did we explain Rabbi Menashe, the third opinion?
Rabbi Miyasha says the following. He's the one who says that he differentiates between a Jew and a non-Jew. When it comes to a Jew, they're only liable if they use the phrase, the main name of Hashem. If, on the other hand, a non-Jew curses God, blesses God, so then it doesn't make a difference what name they use. So that is what Rabbi Miyasha's perspective is, and he learns it from the fact that the pasuk that says that you curse, that they bless God. That where is it? It says Vayikra Kav Daled Pasuk Tet Zayin Binakvo Shame Yumas. It's when they curse the name, then that person will die. And so by referencing specifically shame, and in that pasuk it says Kager Ka Ezrach, so the Jew and the convert are alike. So only the Jew and the convert have the limitation of just the name of God. So that's the explanation of Rabbi Miyasha.
How's that different for Rabbi Yitzchak? If Rabbi Yitzchak also says they have to say the name, right?
No, so Rabbi Yitzchak Nafka, according to Rabbi Meir, he would say that the same law applies to Jews and non-Jews with respect to using nicknames. That both Jews and non-Jews are subject to the death penalty for using a nickname, other names of God, not just the main name. And he uses, like we saw a few moments ago, Kager Kezrak to tell us that no, only Jews get the stoning. And so and whereas everybody else gets something different, whereas non-Jews get beheading. So again, there are three different viewpoints. Rabbi Meir says doesn't make a difference what name you use, and whether you're Jewish or not Jewish, you're going to get the death penalty. The Chachamim say it does make a difference whether you what name you use. Only for the main name of Hashem are you going to get the death penalty, and that is true both for Jews and non-Jews. It is only Rabbi Miyasha who differentiates between using between Jews and non-Jews with respect to what names one would be liable for. Okay, so now Tana Rabbanan. So now we're going to cite. We had said earlier, we referenced the fact that the prohibition of blasphemy applies to non-Jews, and we're now going to quote a brisa regarding the 7 Noachide laws that includes the lesson that we referenced above about Hashem, the name of Hashem, referring to blessing Hashem. And so let's take a look and we'll see it. So Tana Rabbanan. Sheva mitzvos nitztavu b'nei Noach. There are 7 commandments that the Noachites were commanded. Dinin, laws. Uvirkas Hashem, blessing God. Avodah Zarah, idol worship. Gilui Arayos, sexual relations. Ushvichas damim, murder. V'gezel, theft. V'ever minachai, and eating a limb from a live animal. As we turn to Nun Vav Amud Bet, Rabbi Chananya ben, and the aleph there changes it to Gamliel. Rabbi Chananya ben Gamliel Amar Omer, he says, Av al hadam minachai, even blood from a live animal is also prohibited. Rabbi Chidka Omer, Av al haserus, they were also prohibited to engage in sterilization. Rabbi Shimon Omer, Af al akishuf, they were also prohibited to engage in sorcery. Rabbi Yossi Omer, Kol Hamer b'Parshas Akishuf, not just sorcery, everything that was mentioned in that discussion of sorcery in the Torah. Ben Noach Muzhar Alav. The Noachites are not allowed to engage in. Because what does it say there? Lo yematzei b'cha ma'avir b'no uvito b'esh. You can't, we should not find among Jews anybody who passes their child through fire, kosim ksamim, or uses divination, me'onein, uses illusions, umenachesh, it predicts the future, umechashef, or engages in sorcery, v'chover chaver, or, second, I just realized I didn't scroll, or is a charmer, engages in charming. The shoel o v'yidoni, or asks, consults ghosts and spirits. The doresh elamesim, or a necromancer. Ubiglal hatoavos ha'ela Hashem Elokecha morisho sami panecha. That because of these terrible abominations that they did, that is why God took them out and gave you the land. So this indicates that God has effectively punished the nations that were in the land of Canaan for engaging in these sins. Below Anash, and there can't be a punishment, Ella im Kain Hizir, unless they've been warned. So it must be that these are things that are prohibited to non-Jews. So that is so one more point of the brisa. Rabbi Elazar Omer Af al Haklayim. They were also warned against and prohibited to do engage in klayim. But what kind of klayim? There are a number of different kinds. Mutar b'nei Noach lilbosh klayim v'lezroa klayim. They're allowed to wear klayim, meaning they're allowed to wear shatnez, wool and linen, and they're allowed to plant klayim. They're allowed to plant different kinds of plants with the seeds together. Ve'ein asurin ela b'harbas behema u'b'harkavas ha'ilan. What they are prohibited to do is engage in mating different species of animals and in grafting one species of a tree onto another. Okay, so those are the 7 and possibly more laws. So Minahanimili,
How do we get
how
a mule?
what?
How do we get
Yeah,
a mule?
that would be correct. That would be, it would suggest that it would be improper according to Rebbe Lazar. It's improper to even produce a mule. So how do I know these? Fortunately, there is not a prohibition for when it comes to the animals or the fruit and produce, on the produce and fruit that is derived from such acts. It's only the act itself that is prohibited. So Minani Mili, how do I know all these rules? So Amar Rebbe Yochanan, and this is the key element. This is where we're going to get our pasuk that we said before. To Amar Kra, because the Torah says, "Vayitzav Hashem Elokim al ha'adam lemor mikol eitz hagan achol tochel." We're going to now break that pasuk down, and the pasuk, of course, means Hashem, God, commanded upon the man, saying, "Of every tree of the garden you may surely eat." So, Vayitzav elu hadinim. When it says that God commanded, that tells us that the non-Jews need to have laws. V'cheinu omer ki yidativ l'man asher yitzaveh es banav. Right? I know that Hashem says about Abraham. I know that Abraham is going to command his children to do tzedakah umishpat. Mishpat meaning laws, meaning the proper acts. So we know that there's going to be. So there we see that Sav is related to laws of judgment, of how one engages in court cases, etc. Hashem zu birkas Hashem, and of course this is exactly what we quoted earlier. The reference to Hashem of the second word of that pasuk, Vayitzav Hashem, that is telling us that you're not allowed to bless God. V'chein hu omer v'nokev shem Hashem mos yumas, and we see that the word Hashem is in the context of not allowing curses, because we said, as we've cited several times already, the pasuk in Vayikra Parakaf Dalet, pasuk Tetzayin, that says the name of God. If you curse the name of God, then you will certainly die. Elokim, the third word of the pasuk, the Yitzav Hashem Elokim, Zu Avodas Kochavim. That refers to idolatry. V'chein omer lo yelecha Elokim achirim. Right? You're not Elohim achirim. You're not allowed to have other gods. So al ha'adam zo shvichas damim. When it comes to referencing the that this was a command to man or to Adam, that it refers to murder, because v'chein omer shofech dam ha'adam, that if whoever sheds the blood of a man. So lemor. Okay, so that's the next prohibition. Lemor zu gilui araya. So the next pasuk, the next word in the pasuk is the word lemor. That tells us about sexual transgressions. Now, how in the world does that tell us about sexual transgressions? Well, we need to turn to Yirmiyahu for that. V'chein omer lemor hein yishalach ish es ishto v'halcha me'ito v'haisala ish acher. That Yirmiyahu is talking about a woman who leaves her husband for another man, and it says that lemor, saying if a man sends away his wife and she goes from him and becomes another man's wife, then she can't go back to the first. Now, Tosfos points out, if we take a look at Tosfos, top Tosfos on Nunvavam Bet, lemor hein yishalach, the afal the high krub b'machzir gerusha. So that this pasuk is telling us about the prohibition of returning a divorcee to the wife, if you to the husband, if there's been another husband in the meantime, and ksiv ubnei noach lo who's haruba, and there is no such prohibition when it comes to a non-Jew. Mikomakom, nonetheless, Maisi Raya, this pasuk still proves the Gabi Ishus Ksiv Lemor, that when it comes to marriage, the word Lemor is written to indicate that we're talking about some kind of marriage-based prohibitions, and that is telling us that the rules associated with, and that highlights that lemor in the pasuk in Bereshis is teaching us indirectly all the prohibitions associated with sexual violations, improper sexual relations. Mikol eitz hagan v'lo gazal. So the next words in the pasuk, again back into Bereshis Parak Bet pasuk Yud Bet. I'm sorry, pasuk Tet Zayin. Again, you can eat from all of the fruit of the garden, implying not stolen fruit. Aval achol tochel v'lo aver minachai, and you can certainly eat that, but what you can't eat is a limb from a live animal. Now, Tosfos asked the question because we are going to see in a couple of days, achol tochel v'lo aver minachai. If we take a look at the second Tosfos on Nunvavam Bet, v'ha da'amrinan l'kaman, we're going to see shortly on Daf Nun Tetem Bet, d'lo huter la'adam harishon basar la'achila, that it was not a man was not allowed to eat meat. So how can he possibly have even thought to have aver minachai? So Tosfos' answer is the following: Hainu lahamitz v'le'echol. What was prohibited to Adam was to kill and then to eat. Aval mesa me'aleha. If the animal died on its own, sharia, then he would be allowed to eat. V'asala puke aver minachai da'afilu nafal me'alav asur. And what this is telling us is that even without actually killing the animal, and even if the animal's limb fell off while it was still alive, that would still be prohibited to eat for Adam Harisha. Okay, so now we have now learned all 7 sources, and so we're now going to distinguish and highlight that some of these sources there are arguments about. So let's take a look and we'll see. So the first thing is Kiyasa Rabbi Yitzchak Tane Ipcha. He learned the opposite. Vayitzav zu avodas kochavim and Elokim zudin. And that he says that Vayitzav refers to idolatry and Elokim judges. God, of course, is the meaning there, but it also can mean judges. That refers to the law. So Bishlam Elokim Zudinin. We can understand why the word Elokim could be used to refer to laws. Dixiv v'nikrav bal habayas Eloha Elohim, because we use the term Elohim to mean a judge, and we have the pasuk in Shmot Parakaf Bet. So again, next week's parsha that says that when the person comes to the judge. Va'ela vayitzav zu avodah zara, my mashma. How do we know that vayitzav refers to idolatry? So Rav Chisda and Rav Yitzchak bar Avdimi. So Rav Chisda and Rav Yitzchak bar Avdimi each had an answer. Chad Amar Sara Maher Min Aderech Asher Tzavisima Sa Asulahem, that they turned away quickly from the way that I commanded them. And what did they do? This is in a pasuk in connection with Perak Shmos Perak Lamed Bet pasuk Chet that talks about the Egel Hazahav. And so, as a result, what did they do when they turned away from God's command? They made an idol. So that shows that God command can refer to idols. The Chad Amar Ashuk Ephraim Rutzutz Mishpat Ki Hohil Halach La'acharetzav. That this is a pasuk in Hosea, Parak Hey, pasuk Yud Aleph, where it says that suppressed is Ephraim, crushed by judgment, because he willingly went after the command, referring to the command of the idolaters, meaning that they engaged in idolatry. So this command refers directly to idolatry. Now, the why would he not like the other answer? It could be that the other answer, although they made the calf, made the golden calf, it could be that there were other sins also that were involved in that process, and so that it doesn't necessarily mean specifically the sin of the golden calf. Okay, so my benayu, what's the difference between these two approaches? Why should it make a difference? So ika benayu ovid kolchavim she'asa ovid avodah zara v'lo ishtachavula. What happens if an idolater made an idol but didn't bow down to it? Lamanda amar asu. When it comes to the pasuk that is cited from the Egel Azav story, so that all it says is that they made it. It doesn't even before they actually worshipped it. It seems that they engaged in the a violation. So mishas asiya mechayev, as soon as a non-Jew makes an idol, that indicates that they're liable. Leman de amar ki hohil halach, but when you cite the pasuk in Hosea, which refers to going after them, ad azul basra ufalach la, until you actually worship it, you won't be liable. Amarava umi ikalamanda amar ovikol asa avodah zara v'lo ishtachava l'chayiv. Is there really somebody who says that if you make an idol but don't bow down to it, you're going to be liable? V'hatanya ba'avodas kolchavim. When we have a brisa that says when it comes to idolatry, dvarim shebezdin shel Yisrael mimisin oleihen. If there's something that a Jewish court will kill a Jew, well, then a non-Jew is also warned. And ain based in Shel Yisrael Mimisin Aleim. And if there's something that a non-Jew is not going to, if a Jew is not going to be killed by a Jewish court, ain bein Noach Muzhar Aleim. Then a non-Jew is not warned against it. Lamaute mai, what does this come to exclude? Lav lamaute ovid kolchavim she'asa avodah zara v'lo ishtachavah. Because after all, a Jew who makes an idol but does not worship it is not actually going to be subject to the death penalty. So maybe that's what this is telling us. No, Amar Papa, lo lemaute gipuk v'nishuk. It's referring to somebody who hugs or kisses an idol. Gipuk v'nishuk demai. What kind of hugging and kissing are we talking about? Ilema kedarka. If that is the way you're supposed to serve the idol, barkatolahu, then you would be liable. Well, no, we're talking about where that's not how you worship it, but that's what you engage in. And so as a result, you're just as that's the kind of thing where if a non-Jew does the wrong kind of service for an idol, so we're going to say that that's what he's not going to get the death penalty for, just like a Jew won't get the death penalty. But when it comes to actually making an idol, according to the opinion that cites the verse in the story of the golden calf, so just making the idol will result in a person's death penalty. So now we're going to highlight, we're coming to the, let's see if we can get a little bit further. We're coming to highlight now the first of the Noachide laws. So dinin bein Noach ipkud. So, in fact, Benoach, if good, is it really true that non-Jews are subject to the requirement to have laws? Vatanya, we have a brisa that seems to suggest that laws is something that only Jews have, because Eser mitzvos nitzavos b'nei Yisrael. Excuse me. Eser mitzvos nitzavu Yisrael b'mara. The Jews had 10 commandments that they got at Mara. That was this past week's parsha. Sheva shekiblu alein b'nei Noach. The 7 that the Noachites had on themselves. V'osivu alein dinin v'shabbos v'kibbut aveim. And they were added 3. One of which is having laws. The second and third are Shabbos and honoring parents. So dinin diksiv sham sam lo chokul mishpat, because it specifically says there in Mara he made for them a statute and an ordinance, and so that refers to clearly the requirement to have laws. Shabbos v'kibbut avaim. How do I know that Shabbos and kibbut avaim were also commanded at Mara? Diksiv, because it says in Sefer Dvarim, when it says that Hashem commands the 2 commandments of Shabbos and honoring father and mother, Diksiv kasher tzivacha Hashem elokecha, as Hashem commanded you. So where was it that Hashem had already commanded us compared to the 10 commandments? V'amar Rav Yehuda kasher tzivcha b'mara. Rav Yehuda says that that's referring to Mara. So we have now a question. The question is that how can we say that laws is considered one of the 7 Noachite requirements when we also have that laws were added to the requirements of the 7 Noachite laws, and that was something that unique to Jews. So we're going to try 4 different efforts to answer that question. So effort number 1, and with those we'll conclude. Amar Rav Nachman bar Amar Rabba bar Avua, lo nitzrucha el la'eda ve'edim l'hasra. No, it wasn't all the details of laws. It was specifically the requirement to have an Eidah, which refers to, according to Rashi, the need to have the 23 judges, because we learn the 23 judges from the fact that we need to have a situation where we have 10 judges and Eidah, a congregation for conviction, a congregation for acquittal, and then we need to have 2 extra judges, as we learned at the beginning of Masechah Sanhedrin. We need to have 2 more judges, and that would mean that we would need 22, and we can't have an even number of judges, so we need to have 23. So that's the law that we learn. Witnesses and warning. So and what does it say, mean that it says that law was added to them? It should have been just the technicalities, as Rashi says. It should have been mitzvahs dayanin, the procedures of the judges. So Ella Amar Rava. So therefore Rava offers a second possible answer. No nitzrucha el ladinin knasos. No, it's talking about penalties. So but akati v'hosifu b'dinin mibai. It should have still said that we're making additions to the law, not the entire law. So as a result, we offer a third possible answer. Ella Amar Rabba Acha bar Yaakov lo nitzrucha ela hoshiv based in b'chol pelech upelech, not b'chol ir v'ir. Nah, it's to tell us that the Jews needed to have a court in every town and in every province. V'ha b'nei Noach lo ipkut. 1 second, but that requirement also is on non-Jews. V'atanya kashem shenitzdavu Yisrael lo hoshiv beit dinin b'chol pelech upelech b'chol ir v'ir. So the same rule applies to Jews and non-Jews with respect to that. So that can't be the thing that was added. Ella Amarava. So we finally add answer. Hi Tana Debei Menashehu. This is the Tana of Bnei Menashe. That they remove 2 of the 7 mitzvos, and they replace them with 2 others. They remove the civil law, the Daled Dinim, and the Kaf of Birkat Hashem, of blasphemy, and the ayol sach, and in place of them, they put in sterilization and klayim. The Tana b'nei Menashe. So let's learn the brisa that we're quoting. Sheva mitzvos nitzdavu b'nei Noach. There are 7 commandments. Avodah zarah, giloy arayos, ushrichas damim, the big 3. Guzzle the eved ve'ever min achai, theft and taking a limb from a live animal. Seirus v'kalayim, and sterilization and klayim. So we see that they've replaced dinin and birkat Hashem with sterilization and klayim. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Adam Arishon Lo Nitzdavu Ela Ad Avo Al avodah zara bilvad. According to Rabbi Yehuda, Adam was only commanded with respect to idolatry. Shenemar vayitzav Hashem Elokim al ha'adam, that Hashem commanded man, Hashem God commanded man, and that is referring to idol worship. Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira Omer Aval Birkas Hashem. No, they also required. They also got Adam was also commanded with respect to blessing God's name. V'yesh omrim af al dinim, and some say it was also referring to the laws. Again, that's different than the first opinion of this brisa, which says that all seven were commanded to Adam Arishon. Kiman Azla. Hada Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, Elokim ani lo sikaluluni, Elokim ani lo simruni, lo Elokim ani yehe mora'i alechem. So whose opinion is it that says Rav Yehuda in the name of Rav is like Rav Yehuda in the name of Rav, who says that when the pasuk says Elokim ani, that I'm God, it means don't curse me, and when I say that, it means don't change me for an idol. And when it says I am God, you should fear me and be careful about justice. Kaman ki yesh omrim. That is the opinion of the yesh omrim that say that all three of these were commanded to Adam. So we will pick up, God willing, from there tomorrow. And so the bottom line is, oh, sorry, I didn't realize I forgot to scroll. The bottom line is that we are continuing our discussion of the Noachide laws and analyzing the brisa from the Tana of Menashe's Yeshiva. But again, for that discussion, please stay tuned for tomorrow's daf. My apologies for going a little bit fast there at the end, but really important stuff, and God willing, we'll have a chance to talk about it again a little bit tomorrow. Looking
How do
forward
we
to continuing our learning.
how does warning apply in the context of cursing? How does one warn? Normally, when you have to have, in most cases, a warning requires two people to warn someone, don't do this because you'll be in violation. How do you warn someone in advance not to curse God, but they've cursed him already? How does that play into the situation?
Yeah, so you make a great point. Of course, the truth is how do you warn anybody about anything? Because if the person just suddenly takes out a gun and shoots somebody, it's hard to warn them. That the same thing would apply here. You have to, the person must have said something to the witnesses that they're planning to curse God. So you're absolutely right that and it's but that's seemingly the way we understand the application of the warning. Now, I will note that in this Gemara that we've been discussing, the quote unquote warning that we're talking about is not the warning that witnesses do of the perpetrator, but rather the warning that the Torah gives, because whenever the Torah includes a penalty, there's also going to be a pasuk that repeats the prohibition that has a warning. So I just want to make sure that we're not talking about cross-talking. But so that's the warning that was referred to in our Gemara today. But you're absolutely right. If your question is just irrespective of our Gemara today, but how do we engage in warning somebody when somebody's going to do something and we have no idea what they're going to do? And that seems very likely in the case of cursing God. Yeah, that you're absolutely right. You need to have a situation where a person's getting very, very frustrated, and so witnesses see that the person is, and is saying things that come very close to cursing God, and then they say, "Listen, if you will curse God, you're going to get the punishment of the stoning." And then if the person goes ahead and immediately does the cursing of God, so then that would be the situation. But you're absolutely right. That and it's like again, most kinds of warnings, you'll be able to get out. Now, the last thing I'll note on that is that we have said that when it comes to a Talmud Chacham, or even the wife of a Talmud Chacham, who knows what the penalties are, etc., so then you don't necessarily need a warning. But again, for most people, I think that we do say that you would need to have a warning, and you're absolutely right that in many situations it would be impossible to give such a warning, whether it's about blasphemy or other things as well. All right. Wishing everybody a great day. I have to head out. I look forward to continuing our learning tomorrow. Tomorrow, God willing, we'll be back in person. And next Monday and Tuesday, I believe Dove will be back and be able to cover those as well. Have a great day.